Hello class, I'm going to demonstrate what you can find on the internet by searching on images and also clicking on the text. In reviewing for the final, it might be helpful to remind yourself of patterns. You notice I typed in here dense irregular connective tissue, and this is what I got. So this should reinforce the pattern of the cross sections and longitudinal sections in irregular form of the arrangement of the collagen fibers in dense irregular connective tissue. And you can click on any one of these and get a little enlargement. You can also go back to text and see what the text says. So here's another pattern. I just shifted the pattern and you can see the arrangement of the dense irregular connective tissue. But you can also click here on the tab of the web and go to a wiki and reinforce. Just a quick reading perhaps might help in reviewing for the final. So I'm going to demonstrate some more of these. If I go back here to images, and then we're going to search on, let's say, transitional epithelium. So now we have multiple examples. This is a good way to reinforce. You see, when the transitional epithelium is relaxed, you have these dome-shaped cells. They're not flattened like they are in stratified squamous epithelium. So I have multiple examples of these. You can enlarge them and then click back here. And again, if you click on the web, you'll see information about those. So that's another example. And by now, when you think of and see and recognize transitional epithelium, you should be able to remember that it's lines the urethra, the ureter, the urinary bladder, and the pelvis of the kidney. And the same is for all the other 8 or so types of epithelia. You should know in the body by now where they are found and how they participate in the structure of the organs. So here's another stratified cuboidal epithelium. I'm just searching on this. And certainly this will remind you of the structure and right there, this most likely sweat gland ducts, could be other ducts, but that's the morphology, a pattern of a double layer of cells surrounding a lumen, like that. So here's a search that I'll perform on kidney medullary rays. So let's go there, and immediately you should be able to remind you. The first image has the medullary rays pointed out, and you can't zoom in, but it should remind you that there are no glomeruli in the medullary rays, but they project up into the cortex. For example, here's a diagram that illustrates these. And so just trying to show you that there's help on the web once you have the discrimination. And here's a very nice diagram that you can take a quick look at. Remind yourself of the circulation in the kidney and the relationship of the proximal tubule to Bowman's capsule at the urinary pole and the distal tubule at the vascular pole between the afferent and efferent arterioles. So I'll just pick a couple more to illustrate, and hopefully you can't spend a lot of time. If you have not been diligent in the course, then you do have a lot of making up to do. Perhaps this will help, though. So I'm going to pause this for. So I've just searched on parietal cell, and for example, here's an image of parietal cells in the stomach. This is reminding you where they are. There's a nice diagram here of parietal cells, reminding you of the makeup within the cell. I believe that there was here's a little bit more of the mucosa of the stomach. Notice the gastric pits aligned with cells that produce mucus. And they're all mucus-producing cells, but they're not goblet cells. They're not like the cells in the intestine. but down here you see the parietal cells. So once again, I'll pick a couple more, and then hopefully that will encourage you, if that's something you think might help, to go out on the web and practice remembering the patterns of what you've learned. I'm searching on endometrium in the proliferative phase, so I can find many images like that. Perhaps a very good one here is where you see that the glands are very short, and it's in the process of adding cells to the glands. Here's probably a very good image of that. You see the glands are rather straight. They're just beginning to kind of coil or crowd up the more the cells are produced and going into finally the secretory phase. So this should remind you of the pattern of the endometrium, and recalling the endometrium is a part of the uterus. Search on the thymus, and in this case you get both gross and meso structures as well as histological structures. Now this one's not labeled, so this is just reminding you of the pattern of the thymus, with no lymphatic nodules in the cortex, just a dark cortex with many lymphocytes in it, and a lighter cortex with fewer lymphocytes. And sometimes you can find some that are labeled, like here's one that's labeled. I saw another one over here that's labeled, right here. And showing the Hassel's corpuscle. Now, here's where you need to be discriminating, because whoever labeled this says this is a Hassel's corpuscle, and I can't really enlarge this, but I would suggest that we're going to find Hassel's corpuscles in the medulla, and this looks like between two lobes, not in the medulla. So that's the case where you need to be discriminating based on what you learn in the course. So let's just search on, let's say, spleen, and see what we find. Okay, lots of things on the spleen. Again, it's reminding you, and here's one that's labeled with white pulp, and then you have to remember the other structures. Here's one that's perhaps labeled a little more extensively, where it's showing a germinal center and red pulp, and the marginal zone separating the red and white pulp, and remembering what happens there, the detection of blood circulating engines, and things like that. So the last one I'm going to search on is Sertoli cells. So I'll just click the search button here, and for this one, for example, you have to pick out the Sertoli cells yourself, but they do label the Leydig cells that are in the interstitium of the testes. And so again, it's a matter of looking down here, and this looks like a really aged. These are Sertoli. Well, basically this is mislabeled, and so that's another example of being discriminatory. Either that, or it's a very aged testes and they've shrunk down to this. So I would look for better examples of the Sertoli cells. Let me see if I can find some. Okay, here's one that's labeled and has a little better example. The Sertoli cells. You can always recognize those Sertoli cells because they have a rather round oval nucleus, and you're always going to see a nucleolus in there. And here's the primary spermatocytes and the spermatids, etc., etc. So you really have to, though, associate what you see out here. It's expanding what you know. Now we're going to go to the course website. I'm just going to point out a couple things that might be helpful.